heathens, and welcome to my channel. I am Beauty Heathen, and my channel is dedicated to the exploration of paganism through the medium of cosmetics. If you enjoy the subject matter or find my content of interest, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and set the bell to all to be notified of when I upload new videos. In today's video, we will be discussing the subject of Aztec theology. Now, before I get into the content, and in case you missed the big, bold disclaimer I'm going to put at the beginning of this video, I am putting a very, very strong trigger warning before I get into this content. Today's subject involves some heavy subject matter. It involves discussion of self-harm. It involves discussion of human sacrifice. And while in previous videos I may have mentioned that among other cultures in passing, no culture up until this point has had that be such a predominant part of their culture and their religious beliefs. So if that is something that is upsetting to you, if that is something that is triggering to you, I absolutely urge you to skip this video. Watch any number of my other ones, and I promise next week I will have lighter subjects, but this video, I even struggled in writing it. But in an effort to be as transparent and honest regarding this culture, regarding their religious beliefs, regarding their practices, there's just no way I can omit all of the subject regarding human sacrifice and self-harm. So, with all of that said, and before I get into applying cosmetics, I also want to, as usual, I did spray the head with hairspray. I bought a different hairspray. It's not working as well, and I think that's why it's having a more patchy effect with the foundation I'm noticing lately. But I also put down a layer of LA Girl Pro Coverage HD in the color Toast. I put down the NYX white eyeshadow base, as usual. And of course, I set the entire thing with Becca Hydra Mist setting powder. Now that I have done the disclaimer and the lead in, I also want to say that it may take me a couple minutes to get into the cosmetic portion, because right before I started this video I looked up Aztecan face paint, just like I've done in previous videos, especially covering more tribal aspects and ancient aspects. I frequently look up different looks, or I look up information regarding the cultures and their, not only their beliefs about cosmetics, their practices about cosmetics, but I might look up inspired looks regarding those cultures in order to direct my application so that I stay as true to culture as possible. However, when I did that tonight, I read that in Aztecan culture, predominantly, it was considered kind of taboo to overly paint the face. So things that we would do today, like putting on blush, painting our lips, that kind of thing sorry. I just lost the word that I was trying to say. Obviously, it's not resolved. It was saved for women who were sex workers. I'm not discriminating against that. I'm not speaking ill of that. I'm just trying to be mindful of the cultural beliefs that they held. So I'm trying to figure out what on earth I'm going to do tonight. I'll figure it out. It's just going to take me a couple minutes. I did read that the regular women did apply some colors to their face, but things such as reds weren't allowed, and the mouth was largely sexualized in their culture, so they tended to avoid painting the lips. Now that I've explained why it's taking me a little bit of time to start applying anything, and why today's look will likely be extremely minimalistic as a result, before I also start delving into the Aztecan culture specifically, I know it is frequent that people mix up the Mayans and the Aztecs. So I wanted to give a little bit of information as to how to differentiate between the two. The culture and beliefs of the Aztecans should not be confused with the Mayan culture or religion. First and foremost, the Mayans were a much older civilization, even though they generally lived in approximately the same area. The Mayans became a civilization around, I believe they traced it back to around 1200 BCE, whereas the Aztecs came in much later. Additionally, they spoke different languages completely. The Aztecs, although they lived in Mesoamerica, their empire was largely in the central Mexico region, where Mexico City now lies today. In contrast, the Mayans were located in the Yucatan Peninsula. I'm probably going to be tripping over my words tonight. Excuse me. Additionally, and hence my trigger warning in the beginning, Aztecs held very largely onto the practice and ideology of sacrificing humans in rituals and for different purposes, and in large amounts. Whereas the Mayans, they tended to be more peaceful and kind, and although they did do blood sacrifice, generally it came in the form of an animal. And if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, do not come for me. I'm not saying that sacrificing animals is right. Personally, that's something I'm against. I'm just giving the contrast. Mayans in generally are considered to be the better civilization of the two. They had a different approach to scientific processes and were interested in the study of the stars. They also made a calendar which is still comparable to the one in use today, and were good students of astronomy. While the Aztecs were mostly involved in war and events that were full of the show of power and force. Mayans were people who were more gentle and kind by comparison. So, I'm not saying that they were all kind and, uh, empathic and, generous and peace loving. I'm not saying that in any means. I'm just saying by comparison, they were a much kinder civilization. And also, the ruling methods of these people were very different. The Aztecs had only one supreme ruler who ruled over all of them, while Mayans had rulers divided into their rule divided into states. So think of it in contrast of the Aztecs had a king, whereas the Mayans had governors, if that makes any sense. I'll get more into Mayan civilization and religion at another time, but I did want to give some pertinent information so that the two didn't get confused as I continue with this subject. Now, let me... And it should come as no surprise that tonight may be a little bit of a longer video. I've been doing quite a few of those lately. So, let me look here. What on earth can I do? It said yellows were okay. Kind of rolls out these two palettes. I'm foregoing highlighter, I'm foregoing blush. Let me take a look at this palette real quick. I know I have, excuse the potential with the So Jaded palette. I might try the Juvia's Place The Warrior palette, avoiding any reds because that would be taboo. So I might do a browns and yellows look. I can use this palette. Like I said, I looked into it right before I started the video, so you get to hear me rummage a bit. Avoid that one. Whoops. I keep bumping into my plastic containers that hold a lot of my tools. Forgive me. Let me take a look at this one. This is one I haven't used yet. Pretty, but not for tonight. I have a couple of Beauty Gems palettes that I haven't touched on quite yet. I have Makeup Evolution. Also one that will not fit with tonight. This is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. You know what, I'll try sticking with these three, see what I can make with it. Time for a challenge, and as I promised, there will be no purple in this video. So, let's see what we can do. Where to begin? Okay. I'm going to start off with the Violet Voss Essentials palette that I got in BoxyCharm. Do not come for me in the comments. This is a subscription I have had before all of the stuff going on, so I'm aware of it. Aztecan religion originated from the indigenous Aztecs of central Mexico. And I'm going to start with the color sand, and I'm going to try to cover the eye with that. We'll see how it works. Like other Mesoamerican religions, it also has practices such as human sacrifice in connection with many religious festivals, which are in the Aztec calendar. This polytheistic religion has many gods and goddesses, and the Aztecs would often incorporate deities that were borrowed from other geographic regions and peoples into their own religious practices. The cosmology of Aztec religion divides the world into 13 heavens and 9 earthly layers, or netherworlds. The first heaven overlaps with the first terrestrial layer. So, to try to put this in perspective, there's 9 earthly layers, so that goes from the Earth's crust down 9 layers. And 13 heavenly layers, the first of which overlaps with the first earthly layer, and then goes up 12 more levels. Each level is associated with a specific set of deities and astronomical events. The most important celestial entities in the Aztec religion are the sun, the moon, and the planet Venus, seen as both the morning and evening star. The Aztecs were popularly referred to as the people of the sun. I'm just trying to get this to cover somewhat evenly. Some nights are good, better than others. Many leading deities of the Aztecs are worshipped in the contemporary or present-day world. We've just omitted the human sacrifice portion of it. The concept of Teotl is central to the Aztecs. The term is often translated as God, but it may have held more abstract aspects of divinity or supernatural oh, it's been a long day. Energy akin to the Polynesian concept of mana. Another subject I will get into at another time. The nature of Teotl is a key element in the understanding of the fall of the Aztec Empire. It seems that the Aztec ruler at the time, Montezuma II, and the Aztecs in general referred to Cortez and the conquistadors as Teotl. It has been widely believed that this means that they believe them to have been gods, but a better understanding of Teotl might suggest that they were merely seen as mysterious or inexplicable. Okay. Just trying to make sure that both eyes are as covered as well as I can. As said previously, the Aztecs would often adopt gods from different cultures and incorporate them into being worshipped as part of their own pantheon. For example, the fertility god Zipetotec was originally god of the Yopi, the the Nahuatl name for the Teapanic people, but became an integrated part of the Aztec belief system. Additionally, sometimes foreign gods would be identified with an already existing god, which is something that we have seen cross over cultures throughout the world. You see it with the Greeks and the Romans. They're all the same deities but have different names. Other deities such as, I'm going to give this my best shot, Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl had roots in earlier civilizations of Mesoamerica and were worshipped by many cultures under many different names. The many gods of the Aztecs can be grouped into complexes related to different themes. Some were associated with aspects of nature, such as the Tlaloc and Quetzalcoatl, and other gods were associated with specific traits, reflecting the complexity of ritual in Aztec society. There were deities related to the pulque, which is a sacred alcoholic drink, but also deities of drunkenness, excess, fun, and games. And many gods had multiple aspects with different names, where each name highlighted a specific function or trait of the god. Occasionally, two distinct gods were conflated into one, and quite often deities transformed into one another, even within a single story. Aztec images sometimes combined attributes of several divinities. Okay, I put down a base color. I'm just trying to figure out what will work. I am going to attempt this color Bakwa, and hopefully all goes well. And as usual, do not look at these heads for a reflection on how these products will work on your own skin. Hello, beautiful pigment. Thank you, Juvia's Place. You have saved my night. Look at that. Oh my god, that's so beautiful. Aztec scholar H.B. Nicholson classed the gods into three groups according to their conceptual meaning. In general Mesoamerican religion, the first group he called the celestial creativity, divine paternalism group. So think of it almost as the upper deities in the echelon. The second, the Earth Mother gods, also known as the Pulque gods, and it also includes Zipe Toltec. The third group was designated for the war sacrifice, sanguinary nourishment deities. Religion was part of all levels of Aztec society. And in order to attempt to try to get this to be somewhat even, I'm going to turn the head so that I can try to do this with my right hand. Religion was part of all levels of Aztec society. On the state level, religion was controlled by the Teototani and the high priests governing the main temples in the ceremonial precinct of the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. This level involved the large monthly festivals and a number of specific rituals centered around the ruler dynasty and attempted to stabilize both the political and cosmic systems. These rituals were the ones that involved a sacrifice of humans. Throughout society, each level had their own rituals and deities, and played their part in the larger rituals of the community. For example, the class of Pocteca merchants were involved in a feast where the merchant deity would be celebrated, and slaves bought on specific slave markets by long-distance traders would be sacrificed. On the feast of Okpanizitli, all commoners participated in sweeping the streets. I skipped the line. Afterwards, they also undertook ritual bathing. The most spectacular ritual of the New Fire ceremony, which took place every 52 years, also known as the Mayan century, and involved every citizen of the Aztec realm. During this, commoners would destroy house utensils, quench all fires, and receive new fire from a bonfire on top of Mount... Okay, I'm going to skip trying to pronounce that one, forgive me. Huixatlan? There, I gave it my best go. Which was lit on the chest of a sacrificed person by high priests. Don't say I didn't warn you about the human sacrifice aspect, because I give a number of disclaimers. I'm trying to get both sides to be the same. Pretty close. Okay. I'm going to take this one here and try to do something on the crease. I'll attempt this color Benin. In the Nahuatl language, the word for priest was Lamakatsui, Kazuki, meaning the giver of things. Forgive me, I am not a linguist. I'm doing my best. The main responsibility of the priesthood was to make sure that the gods were given their due in the form of offerings, ceremonies, and sacrifices. It's adding a nice color to this. Turn the head and attempt on this side. The Teotihuacán of Tenochtitlan was the head of the religious followers and the state religion of the Aztec Empire. He had special priestly duties in different rituals on the state level. However, the Aztec religious organization was not entirely under his authority. Two leading authorities and researchers into the Aztecan religion and culture include the Franciscan friar named Bernardino de Sahagún and the Dominican friar Diego Duran. I have to say, I have a particular affinity for Duran, given he was highly criticized in his lifetime for helping the heathens maintain their culture. One thing I will always appreciate is a religious man who both sought to help people but not take away who they were, which is unfortunately a predominant factor in a lot of missionaries that I have seen anyway. I'm not accusing modern day missionaries, I'm speaking more of in a historical context. Let's see, do I have them equal? Not quite, but at the same time I have noticed that these heads are not the same on both sides of the face. So they're a little bit out of balance with one another. Okay. Let me try to put away this one. Very good palette. It worked. Let's see, do I want to try the Violet West? No. We'll do the So Jaded palette. Sahagún and Diego described the pairs of high Aztecan priests who were in charge of the major pilgrimage centers and enjoyed immense respect from all levels of Aztec society. So these were men who existed at the same time as the Aztecs did, if I'm remembering correctly. I will verify that. If I'm mistaken, I will put it in a note at the end, or I will add it in here somewhere. So basically, think of Sahagún and Diego being as the archbishops of the Christian faith in regards to the amount of respect. Sorry, not Sahagún and Diego. I'm talking about the Aztecan priests and how they were revered within their culture, similarly to archbishops by people of the Christian faith. Wow, I'm tongue-tied tonight. I am so sorry. And the Aztecan priests were at a level of authority that partly transcended national boundaries. Under these religious heads were many tiers of priests, priestesses, novices, nuns, and monks, some were even part-time, who looked over the followers of various gods and goddesses. Sahagún reported that the priests had a very strict training and had to live very austere and ethical lives involving prolonged vigils, fasts, and penances. For instance, they often had to bleed themselves and undertake prescribed self-mortifications in the build-up to sacrificial rites. And when I read this, the closest I could envision this is if you've seen, I know I referenced it in my last video and I'm referencing it again, but if you have seen Da Vinci Code, if you remember the fascist Opus Dei character, that's the best way I can kind of describe it and put it into modern day comparison. for reference. Just trying to make sure that this applies evenly. When I looked up Aztec face paint, this was a common design over the bridge of the nose. So, additionally, Sahagun refers to classes of religious specialists not affiliated with the established priesthood. This included wandering curers, black magicians, and other occultists, of which the Aztecs identified many types, most of which they feared, as well as hermits. Finally, the military orders, professions, such as traders and wards, Katpuli, each operated their own lodge dedicated to their specific god. The heads of these lodges, although not full-time religious specialists, had some ritual and moral duties. Duran also describes lodge members as having the responsibility of raising sufficient goods to host the festivals of their specific patron deity. This included annually obtaining and training a suitable slave or captive to represent and die as the image of their deity in that festival. Oop, little too far. I think we can skip over some of that. It was basically just describing the temples, which if you've seen some photos of Aztec temples, you may already have a mental image of. Let me see. Completely small. That one may work. In front of every major temple lay a large plaza. This sometimes held important ritual platforms such as the Eagle Stone, where some victims were slain. Going off script, there were two main deities. I'm not going to try to pronounce them because I will absolutely butcher their names, but one was more represented by the eagle and the other one was more represented by a serpent. So plazas were where a bulk of the worshippers gathered to watch rites and dances performed, to join in the songs and sacrifices. The audience often bled themselves during these rites, and to partake in any festival foods. Nobility often sat on tiered seating under awnings around the plaza periphery, and some conducted part of the ceremonies in the temples. They used to decorate with flowers and banners, other decorations. Just skip over this section because it's not entirely poignant. When I was doing a lot of this research, ironically, a movie came to mind, and it kind of made me think of a much more brutal and bloody form of the animated movie El Dorado, for lack of a better comparison. I know they also had a white color. I might try the baked browns, because I know this one had a cream color. see if it works well. Okay, my brush isn't quite fine enough, but I'm doing as well as I can, and of course I would put on too much. Another important aspect of Aztec rituals includes the impersonification of deities. Priests or otherwise specifically elected individuals would be dressed up to achieve the likeness of a specific deity. A person with the honorable charge of impersonating a god was venerated as an actual physical manifestation of the god themselves, until the inevitable end, when the god's likeness had to be killed as the ultimate sacrifice under great circumstance and festivities. As with the impersonation of gods, Aztec ritual was often a reenactment of a mythical event, which at once served to remind the Aztecs of their religion, but it also served to perpetuate the world by repeating the important events of creation. The Aztec religious year was connected mostly to the natural 365-day calendar, which followed the agricultural year. Each of the 18 20-day months of the religious year had its particular festival, most of which were connected to agricultural themes. Now, before I get into this part, I will again, trigger warning. So if you decide to give it a go and try a listen, and this is a subject that is hard for you, this is likely now the time where you will want to not tune in. I'm going to try a little bit of this peachy color called My Precious. Which seems to be translating better on this skin tone. Human sacrifice was practiced on a grand scale throughout the Aztec Empire. Although the exact figures were unknown, at Tenochtitlan, the principal Aztec city, between 10,000 and 80,400 people were sacrificed over the course of 4 days for the dedication of the Great Pyramid in 1487, according to American historical anthropologist Ross Hassig. Excavations of the offerings in the main temple have provided some insight in the process, but the dozens of remains excavated are far short of the thousands of sacrifices recorded by eyewitnesses and other historical accounts. For millennia, the practice of human sacrifice was widespread in Mesoamerica and Southern American cultures. It was a theme in Olmec religion, which thrived between 1200 BCE and 400 BCE, and among the Maya. Human sacrifice was a very complex ritual. Every sacrifice had to be meticulously planned, from the type of victim to the specific ceremony needed for the god. These sacrificial victims were usually warriors, but sometimes slaves, depending on the god and needed ritual. The higher the rank the warrior, the better he looked as a sacrifice. The victims would then take on the persona of the god he was to be sacrificed for. The victims would be housed, fed, and dressed accordingly. This process could last up to a year. When the sacrificial day arrived, the victims would participate in the specific ceremonies of the god. These ceremonies were used to exhaust the victims so that they would not struggle during the ceremony. Then 5 priests, known as Tian Makak, performed the sacrifice, usually at the top of a pyramid. The victim would be laid upon the table, held down, and subsequently have his heart cut out. The Aztec world consisted of 3 main parts: the earth world, on which humans lived, including Tamunchan, the mythical origin of human beings; an underworld, which belonged to the dead, called Mictlan, or place of death; and the upper plane in the sky. The earth and the underworld were both open for humans to enter, whereas the upper plane in the sky was impenetrable to humans. Existence was often envisioned as straddling the 2 worlds in a cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. Thus, as the sun was believed to dwell in the underworld at night, to rise reborn in the morning, and maize kernels were interred to later sprout anew. The human and divine existence was also envisioned as being cyclical. The upper and nether worlds were both thought to be layered. The Mictlan had 9 layers, which were inhabited by different deities and mythical beings. The sky had 13 layers, the highest of which was called the Omeokan, or place of duality, and served as the residence of the progenitor dual god Ometol. The lowest layer of the sky was a verdant spring-like place with abundant water, called Teolocan, the place of Teoloc. After death, the soul of the Aztec went to one of these 3 places: the sun, the Mictlan, or the Teolocan. Souls of fallen warriors and women that had died in childbirth would transform into hummingbirds that followed the sun on its journey through the sky. Souls of people who died from less glorious causes would go to the Mictlan, and those who drowned would go to the Teolocan. In Aztec cosmology, as in Mesoamerica in general, geographic features such as caves and mountains held symbolic value as places of crossing between worlds. The cardinal directions were symbolically connected to the religious layout of the world as well. Each direction was associated with specific colors and deities. We find that one will work. To the Aztecs, death was instrumental in the perpetuation of creation, and gods and humans alike had the responsibility of sacrificing themselves in order to allow life to continue. This worldview is best described as the myth of the 5 suns. Skipping ahead a bit. Humans were largely held responsible for the sun's continued revival. Blood sacrifice in various forms were conducted. Both humans and animals were sacrificed, depending on the god to be placated and the ceremony being conducted. And priests of some gods were sometimes required to provide their own blood through self-mutilation. Sacrificial rituals among the Aztecs and in Mesoamerica in general must be seen in the context of religious cosmology. Sacrifice and death was necessary for the continued existence of the world. Likewise, each part of life had one or more deities associated with it, and these had to be paid their dues in order to achieve success. Gods were paid with sacrificial offerings of food, flowers, effigies, and quail. But the larger the effort required of the god, the greater the sacrifice had to be. Blood fed the gods and kept the sun from falling. For some of the most important rites, a priest would offer his own blood by cutting his ears, arms, tongue, thighs, chest, genitals, or offer a human life or a god's life, as so described by the impersonation of sacrifices, impersonating certain deities. The people who were sacrificed came from many segments of society and might have been a war captive, a slave, or a member of Aztec society. The sacrifice might also have been a man or a woman, adult or child, or even a noble or a commoner. And I'm sorry tonight was a little bit rough and that I struggled getting through it. I'm having a difficult speaking day, I guess you could say. Every so often it happens, and I can struggle reading things off, whether it be out loud, or even internally. See what I mean? Tongue-tied. Anyway, I hope this video has imparted some knowledge on Aztec theology and culture to some degree. I'm sorry if today's subject was a bit heavy, but in the scheme of things, I personally found a large portion of the subject to be very fascinating when you view it from a more educational perspective and try not to get involved in the goriness of it. If you enjoyed this video and wish to have more like it, please be sure to let me know in the comments below. Sorry it was a bit rough, but we all have off days, and now you get to see me with one of mine. But don't be shy to contact me. I promise I won't bite. Before you go, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you can stay notified of when I upload and release new videos. With all of that said, until next time, I wish you love, I wish you kindness, I wish you joy, I wish you peace, and most of all, I wish you the brightest of blessings. And until next time, blessed be.